to recognize our city manager, Mr. Garrity, our city attorney, Attorney Carmen, our public safety attorney. Thank you for being here as well today. I'd like to recognize our Chief of Fire, Chief Mayo, our Chief of Police, Chief Thompson, and our Emergency Management Czar, Mr. August Vernon. I saw you walk in. So thank you all for the work that you do to keep our people safe, our community cool and calm, and provide a high quality of services to the citizens we represent. There are 2 items on the general agenda. The first item is recognizing Fire Station 19. There's a second item amending the city code allowing state and federal wildlife officers to discharge rifles for the purpose of eliminating deer within the boundaries of Smith Reynolds Airport. We do have 8 items on the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are approved with one sweeping motion unless there's a member of this council or committee wishes an item to be pulled for conversation. Members of the committee, I'd like to have item C2 pulled just for a brief update. Are there any items that should be considered being pulled from the consent agenda? If not, I entertain a motion. C5. We're pulling items C2 and C5. I'll entertain a motion on the balance, please.
Motion to approve the balance.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly seconded. All in favor of approving the balance of the consent agenda, please vote yes. Opposers have the ability to vote likewise no. The balance of the consent agenda is approved unanimously. I'd like to move to item C2, please.
Item C2, resolution authorizing the city of Winston-Salem to apply for a U.S. Department of Labor Youth Build Grant.
Mr. Riley, before you get started, I think I'll say just a disclaimer. I think Youth Build and SOAR are 2 of my favorite programs that the city administers. For those who aren't familiar with Youth Build, when the federal government dollars are in, we take young folks between the ages of 16 and 24, teach them a skill and a trade in construction. Meanwhile, they're able to earn a stipend and also get their GED. So we're getting young folks off the streets and doing something positive. And I think since we've invested a little city dollars in it, we didn't get the grant. We moved that age from 18 to 24, still impacting those young people in our communities. Now I understand, Mr. Riley, we have an opportunity to reapply for federal funding to be instrumental in this program. If you give us a brief update, please.
Certainly. Good evening, Chairman Taylor and members of the committee. As Chairman Taylor indicated, we do have before us an opportunity to reapply for the Youth Build Grant. The Youth Build Grant is a grant program that is sponsored by the Department of Labor. The most recent NOFA was announced in mid-June, announcing that $85 million was going to be made available to communities nationwide to apply for Youth Build. This item is essentially seeking authorization for us to submit our application for Youth Build. We are seeking $1.1 million for the program. It's a 3-year program. For those that may not be fully aware or familiar with Youth Build, it's a non-residential community-based alternative education program that provides classroom instruction and occupational skills training in construction and other in-demand occupations to at-risk youth between the ages of 16 and 24. The one tweak that has been made to the Youth Build application this year is that they have included some new in-demand tracks, which we are hopefully going to receive funding for our participants. The tracks include pharmacy technician, which is in the healthcare arena, and electric lineman, which is skilled labor. The grant does require a 25% match, so as is our custom, we are coming before you to request authorization to submit the application. I will note that due to the timing of the issuance of the NOFA, and the application deadline, we had to submit the application in advance of this committee meeting. The NOFA was issued in mid-June, and the application deadline was actually August 6th. So we didn't have an opportunity to bring the request before this body prior to that application deadline. So essentially, we're seeking your blessing on the application that we have submitted. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Well, just Councilmember McIntosh, and I saw Councilmember Larson.
Just a quick question about how competitive these grants are. What do you think our odds are that we'll...
Well, they are incredibly competitive, I will say. We have received some, we received a Youth Build grant in 2012, I think was the last year. We feel good about our application, to be honest with you. I think we've put together a really strong application. We've received feedback from the most recent Youth Build grant that we submitted for that was not awarded. So we've taken that feedback to heart. We have engaged our federal advocate on this particular grant. So we're definitely putting our best foot forward. It is competitive.
Thank you.
Councilman Larson.
We won't send the money back if you get the grant. So don't apologize for being aggressive and actually trying to improve our labor market here in the city. We certainly applaud that. I am grateful for that effort on your part, and hopefully I'm sure you put in a good grant, so we'll look forward to distributing the money.
Councilwoman Scipio.
I've heard some very good things about Youth Bill. I've heard we've had some challenges executing the program. I was trying to promote this to a young person that I knew, and he said that he would not be able to participate because he was homeless. He did not have an address. Is there some requirement that they have to have a residency? If not, I think we might need to explore how do we serve those who really are needy like that. He had no residence.
Councilwoman Scipio, and I think I'm going to take a stab at this question and not throw it to staff. I don't think there is a requirement to have an address, and I think even if there were such a thing, we could be creative by maybe using the Bethesda Center's address or the Salvation Army's address, but this is just designed to make sure those young people have an opportunity. So if you know of somebody like that, give us his information or her information. Ladies are certainly welcome to apply as well, and we'll certainly try to do what we can to get them connected. The problem I see is that the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. I mean, there is such a great need for this program and for programs like SOAR, but we can only take a few people. So that would certainly be something that would be an item we'd have to overcome. But, yeah, we'd be happy to have his name and information, and I think we can follow up. Mr. Raleigh.
I think you nailed that, Councilman Taylor. We don't, to my knowledge, have a requirement for an address. We have had people who have actually in the program experienced homelessness during the course of the program, but that's something we will certainly keep an eye on.
Mr. Chairman, you should look into that very carefully because there are some programs you do have to have an address.
Yes, ma'am.
And so even that individual who they were communicating with, maybe they didn't quite understand the program and told them you have to have an address. So that's a good point. Also, you've mentioned your SOAR program. I think briefly, some people may not know your SOAR program, that you could introduce that a little bit to us.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Burke. So there are two programs that are citywide programs. Both of them reside at Bellevue Recreation Center. Youth Build, which you've heard about, is one. The other one is SOAR, which stands for Successful Outcomes After Release. It's an acronym. So we take folks who may have felonies or misdemeanors who want to feed their families, and we give them an opportunity for roughly 6 months with the city of Winston-Salem in sort of an internship or that type of program. And, you know, if everything goes well, they come early, they leave late, they work hard, they have an opportunity to be rolled over into full-time city jobs. The second component of the program provides grantee funding to nonprofits and community agencies that do the work of working with young people, making sure they're doing positive things, keeping them off the streets, and then, you know, organizations that work with helping former offenders, whether that might be through housing, whether that might be through providing stipends at Southside Rides to teach them auto body mechanic repair. So it's a great program. We've had the program in existence for many years, and we're doing everything we can to fight poverty. Now, I'm going to be brief again, but there is a real sense of thought in this city where the only way to fight poverty is you send a kid home with a book bag full of food or some other innovative program like that. Well, I'll tell you, these programs are indeed fighting poverty because you're taking folks who would normally be overlooked and not given an opportunity and giving them opportunities to be productive and to feed their family. And I've learned from working in the Department of Juvenile Justice and living in this very community and these programs represent that if you raise the level of expectation, people tend to rise to it, and we're able to make a complete difference. So that was the SOAR program in short, Mayor Pro Temp. Hopefully I didn't miss any points.
Very good. Thank you.
One more question. Could you just refresh us on the Youth Bill program in terms of commitment? Are the young people in the program for 1 year, 2 years, to get their GED, to get the training, and then, you know, what is their commitment to complete that program? We do both SOAR and Youth Build in 2 cycles, but I'm going to let Mr. Riley give us an update.
Sure. Councilmember Scipio, I'll speak to Youth Build. SOAR's commitment is it's a 6-month term of engagement with the participants for Youth Build. The federally funded version of that program is essentially a 9-month program, but it can be modified based on the track that an individual participant takes, and kind of, it can be tailored to meet their individual needs. So that is somewhat flexible, I will say, but generally speaking, it's a 9-month commitment.
Any additional questions, anyone? So this is actually an action item. So there's been a motion to approve item C2. Is there a second? There's nothing further. All in favor, please vote yes. Opposed, likewise. No. C2 passes unanimously. Item C5, please. Thank you, Mr. Raleigh.
Item C5, consideration of items relating to the purchase of ballistic vests and helmets for the Winston-Salem Fire Department.
Okay. Aggressively coming to the stand to give us information. And so I'd like out of a chief, man. Chief Mayo, if you give us a little bit of information on this item, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem Burke, other members of the council and committee. So that we were fortunate to have the Piedmont Regional Trauma System Board of Directors offered us a 50-50 matching grant to outfit, essentially to buy enough ballistic vests and helmets to outfit an on-duty complement of firefighters. And so we showed you the PowerPoint on this with some information in June. And of course, based on what you've seen in the media, we've had other instances of violence around the country where firefighters have been in an environment where the risk of encountering gunfire was, greater than perhaps what we would have seen 20 or 30 years ago. I have that PowerPoint with me. I'm happy to run through it again or answer questions.
But certainly a sign of the times, and thank you for bringing this forward to make sure that our firefighters are safe while they're doing their job. I think this item was pulled by Councilman Larson.
Right. It seemed to be a timely topic. But what I was curious about is more procedural in the relationship between the first responders that we have in this city, the fire department and the police responding to a specific episode. And oftentimes, of course, I assume the fire department is first on the scene. What I'm curious about a little bit is, when the fire department rolls out with their full load of equipment for a normal sort of response, when and how is a decision made to actually implement this? This is relatively cheap insurance, and I'm certainly in favor of it, but I'm trying to understand for the actual firefighters that are on the trucks, how is the decision made as to when they go into that gear? And how is that made? In other words, what is the responsibility of the fire department to go into a hazardous fire, a potential shooting situation, as compared to the police that are probably more trained to actually accept that responsibility? In other words, would you go in, or would the fire department be actually pulled out of a situation that is involving gunplay, and leave that to the police department to resolve that particular issue? And I know this is complicated because oftentimes you don't know what you're going into, which is also the next question, is when do you actually decide to put on that armor in the sense of protecting our firemen? I think it's just some tough decisions to be made. It's a good tool to have in the toolkit. It's a good option but trying to functionally understand a little bit, help me understand a little bit about how that decision, who makes the decision to put on the armor, what is the relationship of going into a fire zone with the fire department versus letting the police actually perform their function. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So there are two essential situations that I see in my mind where we would deploy the body armor. The body armor stays on the apparatus all the time, and for routine, in our world, what is routine, for the person having the emergency, for somebody who's not in our business, it's not necessarily a routine day, but sort of for our routine emergency operations, we put a lot of faith in the company officer, that is the captain position that's assigned to all the apparatus. We have 24 companies in service today, and there's a captain or an acting captain assigned to all those apparatus. And we put a lot of faith in that individual's ability based on experience, based on training, based on information that they have available to them at the time, to make a lot of decisions, whether they need additional resources, whether they have enough resources and they can turn some back, whether they're going to pull one size hose line versus another, whether they're going to make a hydrant connection or they're going to have somebody else make a hydrant connection. For those situations that are always different, we try not to pin them down too tightly with policy. We just give them general operating guidelines. And we would do the same thing with body armor. If they were going into a situation where, based on experience and training, they felt like they needed the body armor, they would deploy and wear that body armor. And in most of these cases, these would be on medical calls, where sometimes you go in and you go in somebody's house to render medical aid, and you end up getting in the middle of a domestic dispute, or get hemmed up in a back bedroom somewhere where there's an aggressor between you and your route of escape. So again, we put that decision on the company officer. In active assailant situations, we are dispatched on the initial alarm with law enforcement. However, they respond emergency traffic. We respond non-emergency, and we stage, and we do not make entry to render medical aid in active assailant situations until law enforcement at least has the assailant confined. They may not have handcuffs on them. They may not have completely eliminated that threat, but they at least have them, say if it's in a school, they have them confined to a wing of the school, or a wing of a nursing home, or a section of a hospital or a university building, where we can operate safely in other parts of the building where there are medical victims in need. And we go in under cover of law enforcement. So fire and law enforcement form what's called a rescue task force. So we go in under cover of law enforcement. Fire goes in under cover of law enforcement. We provide immediate medical care, typically in the terms of rapid bleeding treatment, for things up to open fractures and other sorts of injuries. We don't even treat that in that hot zone type environment. We remove the patient and hand them off to EMS, who has a triage and treatment area set up outside the hot zone. So in that situation, we're more or less going in and doing rapid bleeding control with tourniquets and that sort of thing, and removing the victim.
Well, a compliment is the armor we're talking about is actually then worn on top of your normal wear, right? Your normal firefighting equipment.
So this would, the vision is for the ballistic protection to be worn in medical situations. Okay. It's too much weight. The fit isn't good if you try to encompass, try to put on a structural right. Firefighting ensemble, ballistic protection, self-contained breathing apparatus. All that stuff is really not designed to work together. You're either rendering medical aid in a high-threat situation, or you're conducting fire suppression operations.
The infamous incidences where fires have been started and police have been targeted, fire department has been targeted by shooters. This really is not going to help that incident too much.
Not very much.
You still rely on, obviously, a close working relationship, which we're fortunate to have, I think, with our police response is incredibly fast, I think, with the support of the fire department. I just wanted some clarity. It's a sad commentary. This is a sad commentary, I think, that we need to buy this kind of equipment. It is cheap insurance, and I'm certainly going to be in favor of it. I was just trying to understand sort of the environment in which it was going to be applied. Thank you.
Councilman McIntosh.
Mr. Larson just really spoke to my point. As happy as I am that we are providing our crews this protection, I just want to comment on how sad a world it is that we live in, and we have to Kevlar up our first responders.
This is a good example of what I like to say, where we're having to make the best decision, and making the best decision is not the same thing as making a good decision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I recognize Councilman Larson for a motion. A motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please vote yes. Opposers, no.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
C5 passes, I imagine, unanimously. That brings us to our general agenda, where there are only 2 items. Can we call item G1, please?
Item G1, recognition of Fire Station 19.
I'd like to cue up Chief Mayo to give us some comments. All right.
I'm going to speak just very briefly about this and then turn it over to Nick Webster from Risk Management. I just want to say, in recognition, so the crew from Station 19 who is on duty today, they are here with us to receive the award. There are 3 crews that staff that station, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the effort that they have put into operating safely. They have bought into and implemented procedural changes and things that we have implemented over the past several years that has made their job safer. However, this is about an 8-year span that they have been with no lost time injuries in a occupational sector that injures over 100,000 firefighters a year. So I say that to say this, this predates Trey Mayo as being the fire chief, so this work had been going on for some time, and we do appreciate the effort. I also would say thank you to retired Assistant City Manager Derwick Page, to Assistant City Manager Damon DeCane, to Mr. Garrity, to you all as the Public Safety Committee, and to the full council for supporting our endeavors to increase training, to make sure that we can that we replace fire apparatus as soon as we can afford. About 25% of firefighter deaths in this country occur responding to or returning from alarms. So it's important to keep modern fire apparatus that are in good shape on the road. And you have also supported safety and training officers who have helped us, with training, with providing a component of 2 individuals at all working events who are dedicated to safety functions and making sure that things are being done safely. And when they see something that is not safe, they address that immediately, and then they do remediation to make sure that we always get better. And then, lastly, I would say as with a lot of times in life, there's safety in numbers, and that is, no more true anywhere than with the fire department. And so, you all supported us with a SAFER grant. It was a 2016 dated grant, but it allowed us to put additional personnel on the scene, and that is the number one thing we do to make sure we are operating safely, is putting enough people on the scene to handle whatever the event is. So I just want to say thank you all for that, and I will now turn it over to Nick.
Thank you. And before we give our official commendations to Fire Station 19, I want to recognize the Director of Risk Management, Mr. Nick Webster.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, committee members. I could not put it any better than Chief Mayo, so I'll be very brief. Like he said, this is a remarkable achievement. This is over 8 years in the making, considering how dangerous a job being a firefighter can be. I think this is a testament to how well prepared and how much of an effort has been placed on safety by the fire department and the staff. And it is my hope that, like you said, it's been 8 years, that come 2043 or so, maybe we'll be celebrating 1 million hours without a lost time accident. So I just want to award them with this plaque, and congratulations to Station 19. We're very proud of you and appreciate your partnership.
Mr. Garrett is recognized.
Just wanted to clarify for everybody. Station 19 is on Glen High Road, correct? That's right. It's actually in the East Ward.
But it started off in the Southeast. Let's make that clear. And gentlemen, yeah, right. Hey, gentlemen, Fire Station 19, good gentlemen. Would you have any words or comments? We're running great on time. Would any of you like to just say a couple of words for a few moments? If not, if you're a man, a few words, that's fine too.
Come on, tell us how
you came on. You got dressed for the party. You might as well dance.
Talk to the mic.
We're here to serve, as Chief Mayo said. There's always something, a new trend in the fire service, something that we have to jump on quickly, and I think we're doing that.
And before you leave, you just give your name and you give the fire station address for the record.
Sean Harbor, and this is Kevin Sidney and Daryl Davidson.
Thank you for the work that you do, and we'll give you another round of applause. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks again, Chief. Item G2, please.
Item G2, ordinance amending Chapter 58, Article 1, Section 3810I of the Winston-Salem City Code to allow state and/or federal wildlife officers to discharge rifles for the purpose of eliminating deer within the boundaries of the Smith-Reynolds Airport. This item was sent back to the Public Safety Committee at the June 17, 2019 City Council meeting.
All right, I mentioned our public safety attorney a little earlier, so just want to give Attorney Sykes the floor to just cue us up on the item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, council members.
Thank you.
Again, this was originally presented in April as an information item. It came back to this committee in June, went to City Council, and they referred it back. We have updated the CARF that is in your package to reflect notification efforts to the residents who are within 500 feet of the airport. That letter was sent on June 28th, and approximately 767 letters were sent. A copy of the letter is also been provided to you. The airport also made additional efforts itself to provide notification. The airport director, Mark Davidson, is here if you have any questions on that regard. We double-checked with CityLink that there were no citizen contacts with CityLink to talk about this item. The airport provided, at last check with Director Davidson, 9 citizen messages in response to the notification letter. So, again, the revised CARF, the letter, and the ordinance as it would be revised are all in your packet.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, I'll start by saying I think you've done a great job with reaching out to the community, hearing their concerns, and even after we continued from the council meeting last night, making sure the letters got out. I appreciate that. I know there might be some comments around the table, but I just want to start by saying that, I certainly support the airport. I certainly support the community around it, and I think my primary concern, not being the councilman of the area, but on public safety, is just to make sure everybody's safe and that, we got our eye on things out there, which I know you are doing, Mayor Pro Tem Burke. It does make me, I guess, a little uneasy knowing that suppressed rifles will be fired in the community, even though I know it is for the greater good. But there were some questions that came up, Attorney Sykes, and maybe I've got 3, or maybe we can run through them fairly quickly.
Sir.
I got a phone call from someone who just, and I know there's somebody who signed up to speak. I got a phone call from someone who's just saying, simply, why are we not able to put up a fence? If we're concerned about deer population running on taxiways and runways, then why not be able to put a fence or a double fence to prevent, the wildlife population from entering to the taxiways and runways? So,
And I would defer to Mr. Davidson.
Director Davidson?
You don't want to answer that one?
No, sir.
We do have an existing fence surrounding the airport.
It still hasn't been effective.
It's been, I can't imagine how much wildlife we'd have without it, but we've actually had some funding. I think Councilman Larson asked at a previous meeting about, the wildlife fence, and if you come down North Liberty Street, we just invested over $150,000 in a wildlife fence that has where you can't even dig under it, and it's a lot taller than our existing fence. So we are still addressing that fence issue, which is very costly as well.
May you ask?
So please, Mayor Pro Tem.
Give your name first so we know who.
I'm sorry, Mark Davidson, Airport Director, 3801 North Liberty Street, Winston-Salem.
What about, Mr. Chairman, the one on Airport Road? That gate there?
Yeah, we have an exterior fence and then an interior fence. Like the one down Airport Road is just exterior, and then it stops. But if you come further down into the woods, you'll see there's another fence.
So thank you for answering that. The first question is, the second question rather is, are we able to use like Nextdoor or some other electronic app to make the neighbors aware? I know they're going to be hunting at night. But I think the concern is that some unaware trespasser or some young person might be inside of the gates and something bad happens on our watch. So I guess, are we able to notify the community by application when we go out to them to do some sort of harvesting of deer in this regard? And maybe that's not a question for you to answer, but maybe our public safety attorney or our city manager can answer that. Can we utilize Nextdoor or some other app to make the neighbors aware before the tactical team goes out to do what they do with the deer?
Chairman Taylor, we do have that capability. If the airport would work with us and let us know when they want to do it, we could use Nextdoor, our social media, and other things to try to communicate with citizens near the airport, as well as we could, if they wanted to, do reverse 911 phone call to the neighborhood.
And Mr. Davidson, are you agreeing to work with us if this
Yes,
does
and
pass?
actually, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is here. Andy Moore, and they're the group that will be handling it, the federal wildlife officers, and we'll be communicating with them because they can't gain access without us knowing. So it's a partnership, and I'm sure they're willing to work with us, and then we'll relay it.
I love it. My third question, and we'll go around the table. The CARF indicated there were 9 citizens who sort of reached back out after the letters went out to the residents. Were they in favor of this particular ordinance, or were they not in favor? It didn't say what the citizens said. It just said they were 9 responses.
Correct, and I'll defer to Director Davidson on that also because the responses were provided directly to the airport.
There were 9 responses. 2 of them were via email. 1 didn't provide a name. I tried to contact them back. 5 were very concerned about the, using suppressed rifles near neighborhoods, and I was able to talk to them. That was one good thing about the phone calls, is I was able to talk to them. I got feedback from the U.S. Department of Agriculture about how they would not take any marginal shots, and safety is the utmost importance. A couple of them just wanted me to know that they spotted some deer near their home and wanted me to know the location. So it was sort of a mix, 5 against and 4, sort of just wanted more information. One was a hunter and wanted to know about the measures we'd be taking.
Okay. Are there any questions or concerns that we need to discuss around the table? Councilman Larson.
On the fences that are currently in place, do we have signs posted on those fences, say no trespassing or anything like that?
I can't remember the feet, but if we don't, I know the state provides it. My operation analysis, our analyst is here, Shoaib Quater, and I think we have them every so often feet, but we can
I don't
put
know.
out more signs.
Obviously, deer don't read signs,
Yeah.
but I'm curious about people that are walking around, and if we have a period of time, like during a certain week, that this hunt is going to occur, I mean, just even a bracket, would it not be useful to post something on the perimeter that would be a warning that over the period of time, such and such to such and such, that a harvesting or hunting would occur, as a way to alert the casual wanderer? I mean, I think social networking and a variety of other things are useful, but clearly somebody that's getting ready to go onto the site, at least giving them a warning. Would that not be a possibility
That is
to
a strong possibility.
post the perimeter with some signs that explain, sort of like no parking, do not come into this area during that time.
Yes,
But yeah. Otherwise, I think it's a reasonable. I have had, actually, since we talked about hunting deer with bow and arrow, I've had several comments on deer hunting throughout the city and how bad the deer have gotten on occasion. So I can see how you could have a problem out there.
And I was a fan of urban hunting.
I
just want to state for the record,
remember that.
for that very reason. So if there was no additional commentary, I think there is a gentleman who signed up to speak. I'm going to try my best to pronounce your name. If I don't get it, just come and give your name and address for the record. Mr. Davidson and Attorney Sykes, if you just hold tight for one moment.
You can stay there, too.
Yeah, just because we may need you to come back. It's Mr. Geraldine Travick. And if I've gotten it incorrect,
Miss Travis.
Ms. Travick, do you need to speak on this item? Please come and give your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor, committee, for allowing me to speak. Let me just firstly say I have written some things down because I didn't want to forget what I had to say tonight. But Mr. Davidson, I'm Geraldine Travick. You received an email from me, the concern about the wildlife at the airport. And we also have other issues about the airport. Okay. And I also copied my Councilwoman Burke and also the mayor about my concern about the issue with the wildlife. But may I read this quickly, please?
Please do.
Okay. I gladly welcome the wildlife assessment and embrace solutions to mitigate our community's concern for safety. Nonetheless, I do value the importance of wildlife and endangered species. It seems the major concern and why this is really being proposed is keeping the aircraft and lives safe at the airport, more so than the residents in the community. We are requesting the City Council of Winston-Salem to have at heart the concerns for safety of the residents and taxpayers in North Woods Estates and surrounding neighborhoods. All lives should and do matter. Wildlife is hazardous and costly to our homes, our vehicles, and our people. In Northwoods Estates, I call my neighborhood home. We have vested in our properties, and invested, rather, in our properties, and we expect the same respect for our safety, our health, our tranquility, as Smith Reynolds Airport is requesting for pilots, passengers, and aircraft. I have questions. My first question is, what safety guarantees will we have during the hunting process? Question number 2 is, who, when, and what kind of air rifles will shoot the wildlife? Is it a quiet rifle? Can the pellets be fatal to humans? What kind of wildlife will be shot? And I'm sure with the wetlands from Brushy, I think it's Brushy Fork it is, snakes and other pests are present. They can easily migrate to our neighborhood where we garden. I'm a gardener. We assemble, we play in our yards. Will they be also included in the hunt? So will snakes also be shot? Question number 4 is, what time and how long would this hunt take place? Question number 5, how and when will we be notified of the hunt's beginning and ending dates? Number 6, what happens after the hunt? What type of reinforcements? Someone mentioned fences that evidently are not working. What type of reinforcements would be constructed to prevent wildlife from spilling into our neighborhood at an alarming rate after the hunt? Right now, I live on Airport Road. I've been there for over 40 years. We presently now have a lot of deer, fox, wild turkeys in our yards. That is because I don't think the fence that they have surrounding the airport is really working. Somewhere it has been breached. And I think because of the vegetation that has been moved from the Teresa Avenue area has caused the wildlife to migrate closer to our neighborhoods. It's probably why the increase of wildlife. So we have a lot of concerns. So this is all I have to say tonight. So thank you for hearing me, and we appreciate your concerns for our neighborhood, Northwood Estates. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Traffic. Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Some questions. Can any of those questions be answered this evening, Mr. Davis?
Were you asking me?
I was saying the questions that you asked. Can you answer them?
We are fortunate to have Andy Moore with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Wildlife Services, because I'm not a hunter, and I believe he has a lot of the answers that we've talked about before. So if you don't mind, if you...
Yes, that'd
Mr. Moore,
be fine.
please come forward. And I've jotted the questions down, and while you're making your way, we're going to need you to give your name and address for the record. But I will say, Ms. Traffic, I commend Mayor Pro Tem Burke again, because it came through committee, it went to the full council, we had some questions on the council level before we voted on it, sent it back to the committee, because it's always better to measure 10 times and cut once. So what you're seeing is an effort by this committee and this council person to make sure that your rights are protected, as a resident. So I want you to hear that personally. Sir, Mr. Moore.
Yep.
You give your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Andrew Moore, 444 Bristol Drive, Statesville, North Carolina.
Okay, let's run them down really quickly. She mentioned the safety guarantees, and we talked a little bit about that today. But would the rifles be silent, and what type of rifles? We know there will be suppressed rifles. If you just talk a little bit about what they are.
Yes, so those are all very good questions, so I'm glad she asked. Just for clarification, the types of firearms that we would use are center-fired rifles with the use of sound suppressors. Those rifles, they aren't completely silent. They do make noise, but it is much reduced. As far as the safety aspect of it, we're going to make sure that any of the work that we conduct out on the airfield is in only the safe location to do so. So, as mentioned, a lot of those areas where there are communities in the backdrop, those aren't areas that we're wanting to target. We're going to only work in areas where it's safe to use these firearms. The firearms that we use will only be used from suspended from the back of a vehicle, from an elevated platform, so we'll be shooting down into the ground. We will use frangible ammunition so that when that impacts the deer, it will break up the bullet, so that will cause much less, or will allow for much less penetration through the animal and the potential for some type of ricochet.
You just mentioned deer. Tell me exactly what animals will be hunted. That was the next question.
For us, we're primarily focusing on white-tailed deer here.
And how long would the hunt take place, sir?
The hunt, it's not really hunting. The sharpshooting activity for us would, we prefer to do this in the fall when a lot of the green vegetation is off. It allows us to observe deer a lot more easily. We would imagine that we would need to conduct these activities probably a few different nights on maybe a spread out, once, twice a week over a period of 3 or 4 weeks to hopefully get those numbers down to where it's much safer on the airport.
And if you don't mind me just skipping around, sit tight. Ms. Travick, I know you mentioned the next question was how would they be notified, the community be notified, and you've heard us have conversations about maybe implementing some applications. Mr. Larson has mentioned, maybe going out and putting some parameters up, letting people know that they're out, and we will try to look for other innovative ways to make sure that the community is aware if this is approved this evening. And the last question is sort of, Mr. Davidson, what happens after this process takes place? I think using the word hunt was bad, and thank you for the correction. But the operative word here is potentially hunt. So when the deer are harvested or removed, what is the next steps? Are we looking at additional fencing, or are there some other measures that the airport will put in place to ensure that we try to minimize wildlife getting onto the premises? That was the last question.
Sharing the plan you guys just recently did. We work in partnership.
Great. Whoever needs to answer it, that's great.
Yeah, so the goal of any type of wildlife management plan on airports is usually the same for all species. And of course, we have conducted the hazard assessment here at Smith Reynolds. We observed all the wildlife on the airfield for a year, and then helped them to develop a wildlife management plan that is a long-term plan that the airport will maintain. It does outline some of the recommendations that we've made in the hazard assessment to try to reduce a lot of these wildlife threats. And when it comes to deer management on an airfield, it's a big project. It includes habitat modification, so any chance you have to remove desired habitat inside a perimeter fence is something that we work really closely with the airport on. I know the airport's work to try to remove as much of that as possible. We do know that based on our recommendations and our observations of the fence line, we've tried to identify those areas where deer are coming in and out, and the airport has worked to replace and repair, I think, all of those areas that we've documented. The issue with fencing, though, the gold standard for airports is 10-foot fence with 3 strands of barbed wire, with also having a 4-foot skirt underneath that could prevent anything from washing out or crawling under. And as mentioned before, that's a very costly investment. But the thing with fencing is you just need to maintain it. If you do find crawl unders after these operations are finished, we'll work very closely with the airport, and the airport has gotten really good about maintaining their fence. So just keeping all those areas where deer can crawl under closed in is, the primary goal after the deer would be removed from the airfield.
Councilwoman Scipio.
This is an amendment to our ordinance, and I think we're having discussion about what will happen this year. Is there a process or an agreement that we would be notified every year when you're thinning the herd so that we can let residents know? Because I'm assuming they don't have to come back every year to alert us.
Once the ordinance passes, that's correct, unless council wants to impose.
And speaking with our city attorney, Attorney Carmen, and I think there might be an appetite just to make sure that we state that not only this time, but going forward. Just look, several things can be true at the same time. Yeah. We want to support Smith Reynolds, but we also want to support the airport. We're just trying to talk through this and do everything we can. So we're not trying to, I don't want the airport folks to feel like we're trying to put impediments to your success, but when folks like this come down and speak, we got to take them seriously. So thank you for being patient with us. Councilman Bessie.
It occurs to me, just with that last question being raised, was there consideration given to making this a renewable limited time permit process, that this type of firearm hunting could be allowed within city limits for the airport for a specific length of time under certain conditions and make it an annually renewable permit.
To my knowledge, that was not the request, but certainly if council wants to look at that.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that that necessarily is the way to go, but raise it as a possible remedy to the question that was just asked about. How could you have them come back with the times, et cetera, each anticipate use? As I understand, if I may,
please do.
As I understand it, your objective in this case is not herd size management, but to come as close as you can to eliminate the deer population inside the fence.
That would be the objective. Unfortunately, on airports, we usually follow a zero tolerance policy for a certain number of species that are a very serious threat to aircraft, and deer are one of those animals. So yes, we would want to try to get that airport environment completely free of deer.
Yeah, and in this case, the deer are the only ones that are large enough. You don't have a bear population established in this area.
Right, and unfortunately, you cannot harass deer very well from the airport. Unlike a lot of our bird species that we have problems with, we do. There's not a lot of techniques for trying to harass deer away from the airfield. So, and that's definitely a good concern. My only, I guess, addition to that would be that occasionally, deer may come back and get on the airfield. So having the ability to respond to that immediately before, the situation gets worse, or that one deer may come into contact with an aircraft, having the ability to get out there as deer enter the airfield at a later date would be preferred from our standpoint.
I think you bring up an interesting point about maybe doing a pilot or a permit process, but I'm going to recognize the councilman of the area, Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Yes, I was going to say both of those comments from Mr. Besser and from Ms. Scipio, attorney, and the public safety attorney. We need to put everything in here that we need to this evening, work on it before we get back to our regular meeting, because if we hit and miss, we'll be right back here with the same concern.
So I'm going to come to you, Councilwoman Scipio. I understand, as I understand it, that we have the ability here to amend this particular motion any way we so desire within the legal ramifications. So if there is a motion, we're prepared to do that today. But before we do that, we're going to recognize Councilwoman Scipio.
I'm just I have a little bit of misunderstanding. I thought when this came to us, the intent was to thin the herd, not to eliminate it. Now, I just heard we want to eliminate it because I somewhere saw that we were only going to take out a certain number of deer this year.
It's my understanding that the deer were sort of running on the taxiways and runways, which causes a hazard to those who are utilizing the planes and to the equipment, which more importantly, the people who are on the planes. Right. So I don't think it was a matter of thinning the herd. It was just making sure that folks who are utilizing the services at Smith Reynolds are safe.
I got that. But what the intent is that this year, they're literally going to eliminate all the deer that live there now. Is that the intent?
That seems to be the intent. Gentlemen, would you confirm or deny?
That would be our intent, is to remove all the deer within the perimeter fence that are currently on the airfield. And I think we counted around 15. Yeah.
Okay. But there's some other deer that's not inside the fence that you're going to let stay. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, anything outside the fence will be left outside the fence and hopefully stay outside the fence.
That's what that was my
Great question. So let me do my best to try to pull it all together here. Councilman Besser, you made some comments. If you would restate those comments, and then I'd look to Councilmember and Mayor Pro Tem Burke for a motion.
I was just suggesting that if you want to strictly enforce the notification, the time limits, and such, that one way to do that would be to require a renewable permit that was good for a certain period of time, after which you would have to come in and get another permit as a part of the ordinance. I don't have any language ready because it hadn't occurred to me until... Yeah.
And are we able to work on this language before our meeting on Monday if this passes for consideration, or should this come back to us for another month, Madam Attorney? Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, what we want to do when we leave, whether it's Monday or tonight, that we will have finalized this and not have to keep adding on or even taking away. Attorney, can you, that amendment that Councilmember Bessie, can you put it in the form that I, this evening, to make the motion that we amend it with that particular language?
And I think his comments was to have require a renewable permit that is good for 1 year, which will cover all 4 seasons. And I imagine then, these nice gentlemen and ladies will be back before us, and it'd be sort of like a pilot program to let the community know we're keeping a close eye on it, and that we could shut it down in the event that things got out of control or things were not satisfactory. Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, I would, first of all, the motion has to be made by one of us 4.
Correct.
But I would support a 1-year permit. Anything less than that, I think, is going to get cumbersome. We could have a hunt, or we could have
it's a bad word.
A harvesting of deer, and then we find out 3 months later that 2 more have shown up or whatever, and then you have to go through the process. I think you need to allow time to work through this, since this is the first time we've done that. I personally am very interested to know that we will see if the problem gets abated over time. You've talked about other control mechanisms that could be put in place. We've got to clear the deck initially, and then try to provide a long-term solutions that will hopefully preclude these sorts of continual harvestings that we're talking about. If a 1-year review of what has been accomplished, and then come back in another year and find out whether there's only 3 deer the following year or something, we would know that we've abated it. But at this point, anything less than 1 year, I think, is going to be difficult to implement in a timely manner. If we see deer on the runway, we don't want to wait 3 months to get through committees.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Larson. Attorney Carmen.
I think it's add a provision that says the ordinance shall sunset 1 year from the date of adoption.
Simple as that.
And then you have to come back and do it all over again. Instead of just coming up with a permit process, which might be wrong, it says 1 year.
Well, can't the permit, I'm sorry, can't the permit just be for a year? Do we have to redo the ordinance every year?
Well, you can evaluate it at the end of the year, decide whether or not you want a permit process and how you want to handle it then. But if you're trying to get something in place for Monday, that would be the easiest thing to do.
So the motion here that Mayor Pro Tem hopefully will be to approve this item, and that it would sunset at the end of 1 year, and then it would come back to us for reconsideration after that 1 year. Am I correct?
That's fine. You have a comment?
He's an attorney too, so we're going to definitely give you the floor.
Yeah, that would be one way to do it, certainly. That would be easy, but I wondered if you're targeting the hunt for the autumn months, that would give the committee, if it so chose, time to bring back the alternatives to your next meeting, and then you could hear comments and make a recommendation from amongst the alternatives. Or you could just do the quick and dirty way and do it now.
Whatever you want to do.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
I was going to make the motion to amend it with the language that the attorney has suggested.
You got the floor.
I'm going to make the motion to amend it and say the amendment, please.
The ordinance shall sunset 1 year from the date of adoption.
That's my motion.
Second.
It's been motioned and properly seconded. Discussion. So no further discussion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please vote yes. Opposers can vote no. The motion passes 3 in favor and 1 abstention, and I have abstained, and I'll be having some comments on Monday when it's come to the full council for consideration. So the motion passes public safety this evening. Any further comments? Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
A comment concerning this issue. We have spent a lot of time talking about this issue. I'm pleased to see that this evening that we have so far with this committee passed it on to the regular council meeting. I feel that with the airport now being under the county managers, with Mr. Davison now a part of the county government, that some of the things we as citizens in the Northeast Ward with the Northwood residents especially had to suffer and be not as respectful that we should have been. That is when the airport was with a committee and not under Mr. Dudley. When we had our meeting, I said to Mr. Dudley, I expect you to treat us, taxpayers we've been paying, with the respect that we deserve. And he pledged himself to do the job. Mr. Davison has been, what I see, wanting to work with the residents. Now, he's not always said everything they wanted to hear. Because forever until we die, and I'm going to die quicker than y'all, but when we die, we will have that airport that we will die knowing what we have had to deal with. And I said when they had the Maisie Woodruff Aviation groundbreaking to the folks, we have been very kind residents. You have not been the airport as kind to us as we've been to you. I say, but we know that it means moving things ahead, but the airport won't be like it used to be when it was the Smith Reynolds, all that commercial flying. I think there'll be a new plan out there. So, Mr. Chairman, when you call for a meeting, I've been in communication with the resident. I don't let a thing get by unless they're well informed. Not only through communication, but through riding through the neighborhood, talking to the residents. And they've had to deal with a lot. I appreciate Ms. Travis for being one of the leaders in the Northwood to speak out against these concerns. Citizens' participation is most important. But I would hope when Monday comes that we'll be able to rest this for a while. And to the gentleman that says no bears out there, I live on Cumberland Road. A few years ago, there was a bear on Cumberland. And what they did, they also called the people or something, they sent a little plane or something, and they could see the bear feet or the prints. Also, we not only have the deer, but we have the coyotes and anything else. And Mr. Davison can go back and tell you, we've come a long way for safety in the airport. We used to have a lot of the children growing up, running and playing. So there were a lot of, and riding their little go-karts, whatever those things. So with the improvements, it's better today than it was yesterday. And I thank you, Mr. Davison, for working with us, because Ms. Travis and her sister, Ms. Willoughby, they have lessons with him all the time about what it should and what's not going to be in their neighborhood. So they've been good, and you appreciate that. Citizens speaking up. So, Mr. Chairman, we look forward to Monday, and the end results we will see.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Temp. And gentlemen, thank you again for being here. I think Ms. Travis may have some additional questions, so hopefully if you'll stay around so she may be able to ask those to you. Is there any other business that should be conducted for the good of the order? Councilmember Bessie. We'll end with Mayor Pro Temp Burke. Councilmember Bessie.
I wanted to raise for the committee's consideration a question of whether there was interest in possibly bringing a report on two of the pieces of legislation that are under hot debate in the General Assembly having to do with gun safety. The instance of the past weekend, sort of amplified by the tragic shooting here in Winston-Salem this week, raised, or sort of don't raise really, but re-emphasize the issues that we've already been wrestling with in Winston-Salem about how to address gun safety and reduce gun violence here. At the same time, there is a very active effort in the General Assembly to press for a full debate on two pieces of gun safety legislation that were filed earlier in the session and have never been brought out of committee for discussion. One is a broad spectrum bill named the Gun Violence Prevention Act. It's got a number of sponsors, including Representative Terry from Forsyth County. The other deals with what are known as extreme risk protection orders, more commonly called red flag laws, that allow, under certain circumstances, family or household members or local law enforcement agencies to petition a court to have firearms removed from the possession of an individual who is adjudged to be a severe risk to themselves or others. There is an effort to gather enough petitions on both of those bills to force a debate on the floor. The Gun Violence Prevention Act would include provisions that are of special interest to local governments, such as repealing the preemption of local ordinances regulating firearms and allowing police departments to destroy seized weapons instead of hang on to them indefinitely for no good purpose, as does the present ordinance require. I wondered if the committee would have interest in setting up a discussion of those. The idea was brought to my attention when some folks who are concerned about gun safety issues asked how to come to the council with a request for a resolution supporting stronger gun safety laws. I said, well, this council typically doesn't like to have to deal with resolutions just telling another body of government what to do, but that if there were live legislation dealing with issues including provisions of specific relevance to Winston-Salem and local government, we sometimes consider adding those bills to our legislative agenda. Well, I will inquire of the committee with subject matter jurisdiction whether there is interest in sort of initiating some discussion of those.
Well, Mr. Bessie, I think it's certainly responsible for us and important for us to have a conversation about gun safety, whether that's what we can do on the local level. I know we've done a number of gun buybacks and several other innovative ideas and concepts. I just recently, last week, met with Nikita McDaniel with Every Town USA, who had also some suggestions about how we can help to curtail gun violence, because it's not just the police department's responsibility, it's all of ours. We can also look to have some conversation about legislation on the state level, all encompassing what we should be doing on the local level to make a difference. So I think you brought that up, and it certainly didn't fall on deaf ears. I think we can move forward with that, and I'll try to keep you updated after I talk to staff. One of the reasons why I let you go first, because this lady here has been chairman of public safety for so long, we certainly want to end with her having the last word, but I'll get back to you on that. I think it's something we can certainly get done. Oh yeah, she gets the last word, so you ask the question now. Right.
I'm curious as to what the format is that you want to have this discussion in. I mean, is it us sitting around a table just having this discussion, or are you talking about bringing in subject experts, or?
I would be interested in having a report on what these particular pieces of legislation would do, what the pros and cons on some of the provisions that are.
Who would be?
From a municipal standpoint, from
who would be doing the reporting to us?
Our attorney,
attorney,
who might get information from the School of Government and several other entities,
and then perhaps also invite whether there are staff members within our police department who would have thoughts on the potential relevance of any provisions to local law enforcement efforts effectiveness.
Thank you.
So I am not comparing anybody to children, but I've got 3 kids, Mr. Bessie, and I never say what I'm going to do because they're going to hold you to it. I think that we can have that conversation. Let's figure out how we format it, and let's do what we can to try to work on curtailing gun violence in the city of Winston-Salem. Councilmember Larson, then Mayor Pro Tem.
Last word. I think as a city government, we should look at every possibility we have to make our citizens safe. I'm not sure what form that takes. I'm not sure what other cities are doing right now. There's a lot of conversation at the federal level and some at the state level. I don't know how much of that can trickle down either for us to take charge of our own destiny in certain areas, or whether it's simply a matter of us weighing in at the state level for what actions we think are appropriate. And I would appreciate, one, having copies of your legislation that's being offered up at the state level so I can understand what they're trying to do, and maybe that's a point of departure. But I would like our city attorney to try to figure out what, if anything, along with conversations with police and fire perhaps, to make our citizens safe from firearms. I am deeply concerned about the number of firearm incidents that we're having in this city. We have 15 homicides, but that does not reflect the violence that's being taken with the use of firearms people are going to the hospital and are being patched up. And I don't have a statistic on that. I don't know if we have a statistic of how many weapon injuries are actually being incurred in this city, but we know there's a lot of them. And I think sooner or later, something's got to start happening in this city to help address that. So I know it's an impossible task, but I would like us to begin to try to start that dialogue. This is an excellent start. Thank you for bringing that to us. And maybe it's just a matter of we do create some sort of endorsement for legislation that is active and send that to our delegation.
Removing the Mayor Pro Tem Burke, it would also be irresponsible of me not to say this. I mean, I do not want to pigeonhole the city of Winston-Salem. One homicide in this city, we always say, is one homicide too many. But I got to tell you, Mr. Larson, we let's just look in the state. You think about Charlotte and Raleigh. I mean, we pale in comparison to the number of gun violence victims and homicides that we're seeing in those major urban areas. So one is one too many in Winston-Salem, but I think it is a national trend. I just got back from a conference in Miami with city council folks and mayors from all over the country who are saying the same thing. So I don't want to make it seem like this problem is exclusive to Winston-Salem, but it is in our city, and it's our responsibility, and we'll address it. Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Yes, well, thank you. I served 36 years as public safety chair for this city of Winston-Salem. When I became chairman, being a woman, it was a difficult time to even communicate to the police and what they're to do and not to do. But because we had a community of people, men, women, diverse, who wanted our city to be a place where people want to come to live and feel good about this city. And as we looked at this city, how to make improvements, we appreciate what the emergency management people were doing, what our fire department doing, but our police on a day-by-day basis have a difficult job to do. Now, Chief Mayo said earlier about the vest when you brought it up, Mr. Larson. He said when you go into homes and there are domestic problems, how some of them act. What I want you to know, when our police go on a regular basis and they go into homes where there are domestic problems, the people can be mad with each other, but then they're going to want to shoot and hurt our police. Now, our police have been able to maintain what they do on a daily basis and still communicate in a positive way with citizens in this community. We don't have some of the problems that some people have with their police department. We changed things years ago where police and citizens can communicate and do things. Now, some of you have been speaking in this community about the incident that took place last week at the BJ Brewery they done. But I have not gotten into it because I've had the confidence in our Winston-Salem Police Department and the respect for them that they will do their jobs in a thorough way. Mm-hmm. And when they do their jobs in a thorough way, it will be presented to us, and then we'll have an opportunity to discuss the matter. Now, we can say in this city that we've had cases where we had to have the chief of police to do research. We've only had one, to my knowledge, where we had one opinion, our chief of police, and the state had another opinion. And quickly we resolved that by bringing everything out front. We have been a transparent police department. And I want us to understand this clearly. A lot of us who've lived in this city a long time, we've seen it grow. And we can go to bed at night and we can walk where we want to walk because we feel good that we're being protected. And as some know, I coined this, we don't put a price tag on the safety for our citizens. And our police and fire understands that clearly, that their job is to take care of us. And I feel that they're doing a very good job. And I want the chief of police to just stand a minute and to let you know, as one citizen, how much I sincerely appreciate you and your staff for going that extra step. I'm not going to read all of this, but as an elected official representing the Northeast Ward, there have been so many times and so many programs that our Winston-Salem Police Department had in my ward And I would say to the other elected officials, pull yours together and see how many programs that they have started with schools, with the children, and with neighborhood association groups. And see they're there all the time, not 24 hours, but 36 plus. So when we open up our mouths and we start all of this about who did what or who didn't do what, let the police let us know. Let their information to us say to us, this is what happened or did not happen. They don't have anything to hide. The city manager makes sure that they understand clearly how they report their news, their information, and our police department has been used as an example. They've gone other places to help other police departments to do their program. So I just want you to know, not only do I have a lot of confidence in you, but the elderly people like me, we thank you, and they have a lot of confidence in our Winston-Salem Police Department. And we clearly understand when you talk about people killing, how many murders we've had, the hardest thing to do is to control people when they're in their houses and in their cars. Who gonna shoot who? When they get in arguments and things. So that's, if we could control it, they'd have our chief in Washington telling every city how to control that. So I want you to know I'm one of your cheerleaders. I thank you for making it possible for me to feel safe and calm and happy living in Winston-Salem. Thank you.
That makes two of us. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And to police, fire, emergency management, thank you for the work that you do. And we're not going to talk over wisdom, so there's no other further business that should be conducted. For the good of the order, we hereby move to adjourn this meeting.